My name is Evelyn Hart. I'm 67 years old, and sometimes when the house gets too quiet, I say her name out loud just to hear it echo. Samantha, my daughter. People used to tell me she had a laugh like wind chimes, light, unapologetic. It spilled out of her like she couldn't help it, like happiness was just the natural sound her body made. But by the time she was 13, that sound started fading, slowly, not all at once. Like the dimming of a song on the radio you didn't realize you loved until it was almost gone. I used to think it was just growing up. You know, puberty, hormones, the mess of middle school friendships, the usual knots and tangles of adolescence. I even remember telling my sister, she's just moody lately, nothing serious. But I see now that I was blind in the way only mothers can be, so desperate to believe everything's fine that we learn how to make the cracks look decorative. I live alone now. One-story ranch, peeling paint, porch swing that groans like it's grieving. My husband, Mark, died 12 years ago. Heart attack. Sudden. He was 58. People said I was lucky it was quick. I didn't feel lucky. I felt robbed. Samantha was 15 then, and already she'd stopped laughing. Stopped a lot of things, really. I told myself it was the grief. Of course it was. Her father had just died. We were all broken. I let her retreat. Let her sleep in late, skip meals, bury her face in books and silence. I told myself she needed time, but even before he passed, the light in her had been changing. It wasn't dramatic. There was no tantrum, no screaming, just a quiet shift, like when you walk into a room and the air feels different, but you can't explain why. She was 11 the first time I noticed it. She came home from school and didn't tell me a single thing about her day, just went straight to her room. That was new. She always used to talk, non-stop really, about bugs or clouds or what her friend Naomi said at lunch. That day I remember she just said, "I'm tired." I nodded, didn't press. And that became our pattern. Each day, less talking, less sparkle, less her. I told myself she was maturing. That's what girls do. They grow quiet, private, self-conscious. I'd done the same at her age, or so I thought. But now, all these years later, I wonder if that's just the story I told myself to avoid asking the real questions. Because the truth is, I didn't want to know. Not really. I wanted easy answers. Clean ones, ones I could tuck into a casserole dish and bake at 350 degrees until the world felt soft again. But Samantha wasn't softening. She was shrinking, and God help me, I let it happen. Because I thought I was giving her space. But what I was really giving her was distance. And distance, when you're 12 and already sinking, can feel an awful lot like abandonment. She was 12 the first time I heard her laugh, and it startled me, not because it was loud, but because it had been so long. We were in the kitchen. I just dropped a spoon into the garbage disposal by mistake, and let out a string of curses that would have made my mother rise from the grave. Samantha had been leaning on the counter, arms crossed, the usual cloud around her. But then, there it was, a burst. Sharp, real, that wind chime sound from her younger years, shaking loose from whatever corner it had been trapped in. And then, gone again. She caught herself, pulled it back in like a secret she hadn't meant to share. I remember laughing too, not at the joke, not at myself, but at her laugh, at the proof that it was still in there somewhere. And I remember what she said after. I shouldn't laugh. I froze. Why not, sweetheart? She shrugged. Wouldn't meet my eyes. It's stupid. Just forget it. But I couldn't. Because it was the first time I realized something deeper might be wrong. Not just puberty, not just grief. Something inside her was telling her that joy was dangerous, that she had to keep it locked away. I didn't know what to do with that. So I did what mothers like me have done for generations when the answers get too heavy. I baked. Blueberry muffins, her favorite. I left them outside her door with a note that said, just because. She didn't say thank you, didn't say anything, really. But the plate was empty an hour later. I told myself that meant we were okay. But okay is a slippery word. It hides things, smooths the sharp edges, lets you sleep at night when you probably shouldn't. That summer she started wearing long sleeves all the time, even when it was 90 degrees outside. I'd ask if she was hot, and she'd just shrug. Fine, she'd say, always fine, and I, always desperate not to push her away, would accept it. I didn't ask what she was hiding under those sleeves, didn't press when she started skipping meals, or when she lost interest in painting, something she used to love so much that her room was covered in watercolor splatters. Mark noticed, but not in the way I hoped. She's just being dramatic, he'd say. Teen girls are all moody. Let her be. And I let him be right. Because it was easier. Because confronting the possibility that something real was happening felt too big. So I did nothing except smooth the edges, smooth the questions, smooth the silence until it didn't feel like silence anymore. But silence is not the absence of pain, it's the echo of it. And it was getting louder. When Mark died, it was like someone cut the wires holding the whole house together. We didn't fall apart all at once. We sagged quietly, like a porch with termites. You don't see the damage until your foot goes through. Samantha didn't cry at the funeral, not once. She sat next to me, hands folded in her lap, face blank, like someone watching a movie they weren't in. People kept coming up to me after saying, "She's so strong," and "You raised such a composed young lady." But that wasn't strength. That was shutdown. I knew it deep down, but I needed to believe she was coping because I wasn't. After the service, I found her alone in the church kitchen, scraping frosting off a cupcake and throwing it in the trash, one tiny flake at a time. Not eating, not talking, just unraveling something sweet until it was nothing. I wanted to pull her into my arms, tell her it was okay to scream, okay to sob, okay to fall apart. But I didn't. I was afraid I'd break her more, afraid I'd start crying and never stop. So instead I said, "You doing all right, honey?" She didn't look at me, just said, "I guess," and I let that be enough, because "I guess" was better than nothing, because I didn't want to see what was behind that silence. That summer, the house got too quiet. No music, no movies, no laughter echoing down the hallway. Samantha barely left her room. Sometimes I'd hear her pacing at night, the creak of floorboards between 2 and 4 a.m. I knocked a few times, asked if she needed anything. She always said no, always, and I always walked away. Told myself I was respecting her privacy. But truthfully, I was avoiding the truth. I was scared of the answer. What if she wasn't okay? What if I couldn't fix it? What if it was me? I started cleaning obsessively. The kitchen, the bathrooms, even the grout between the tiles. I ironed sheets, vacuumed already clean floors. It was easier than asking hard questions. It was easier than saying, "I think you're slipping away." Because what if she looked at me and said, "You're too late"? One night, I found a journal under the couch, a little black notebook worn at the corners. I opened it. Just one page had writing, a single sentence. If I disappeared, would anyone notice? I read it 10 times. Then I closed the journal and slid it back where I found it. I didn't say a word to her. I didn't ask. I didn't scream or cry or call the school counselor like I should have. I just stood in the middle of my clean, quiet house and told myself it was probably just a poem, because facing the truth would mean facing everything I'd ignored. And I wasn't ready, not yet. She was 16 when I found the first mark. It was a Tuesday, rainy. I remember because I was folding laundry and the power kept flickering, like the sky couldn't decide whether to weep or stay angry. Samantha had left her hoodie on the back of the dining chair. I picked it up to toss it in the wash and noticed the sleeve was stiff, crusted with something faint and brown. Blood. I stared at it for a long time, trying to convince myself it was from a paper cut or a scraped knee or, God forgive me, just ketchup. But mothers know, even when we lie to ourselves, we know. I walked down the hallway like I was moving underwater. The air was thick, my heart louder than the thunder outside. Her door was cracked. She was lying on her side, facing the wall, earbuds in. I knocked gently. No answer. I stepped inside. "Samantha?" She flinched, sat up too fast, pulled her sleeves down instinctively. And I froze. Not because I didn't know what was happening, but because seeing it with my own eyes made it real. Her arms were a roadmap of pain, faint scars, fresh lines, some shallow, some not, and all of them silent. She looked at me like she expected to be scolded, like she was bracing herself for shame. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even speak at first. I just sat down on the edge of her bed and whispered, "Oh, sweetheart, that's all." And she broke. Not loudly, not messily, but something in her eyes cracked and she looked 12 again. Not 16, just a little girl who'd been carrying too much alone for too long. I asked her if she wanted to talk. She shook her head. I asked if I could sit with her. She nodded, barely. So I did. We didn't speak that night. Not really. But I stayed in her room until morning. Just sat there in the dark while the rain softened, holding her hand when she let me. And in that silence, I finally understood what I'd done. Not by yelling, not by hitting, not by neglecting her physical needs, but by vanishing emotionally when she needed me most. I'd been so busy surviving my own grief, my own disappointments, my own fear of failure, that I didn't see her waving from the shore, going under inch by inch. And now she was drowning in plain sight. That night changed something, not all at once, but it cracked me open. The next morning, I called our doctor. I made an appointment with a therapist, and I told her, "This isn't your fault. You're not broken, and I'm not going to pretend anymore." She didn't believe me at first. Can you blame her? I'd been pretending for years. But I meant it. Even if it was too late to erase the damage, I could still stop making it worse. Therapy wasn't a miracle. It didn't fix things in a week, or a month, or even a year. But it was the first time Samantha had a space where she could speak without being interrupted, interpreted, or ignored. I went to my own sessions too. Not at first. I told myself it was her healing that mattered. But her therapist said something during one of our joint meetings that rattled me. If you want her to stop hiding, you have to stop hiding too. So I sat in a beige office with an overwatered plant and a box of tissues I swore I wouldn't touch. And I started unraveling the lies I'd been living inside, like the one where my husband had been a good man who worked hard, or the one where silence in a home meant peace, not tension, or the most dangerous one of all, that love without presence was still enough. Turns out it's not. Presence is the point. And I had not been present for a very long time. I thought putting food on the table, washing her clothes, showing up for parent-teacher conferences, that it all added up to love. But Samantha didn't need a manager. She needed a mother, a soft place, a voice that said, "You are safe even when you're not okay." So I started saying it, even when it felt awkward, even when she didn't answer. I'd pass her in the hall and say, "I'm glad you're here." She'd blink like she didn't understand the language. I said it again the next day and the day after that. Eventually, she whispered, "Okay." It was the smallest word, but it was a beginning. We found new rhythms, gentle ones. Dinner didn't have to be at 6 on the dot. Some nights we ate cereal in our pajamas and watched old cartoons she used to love as a kid. Other nights we barely spoke, just coexisted in the quiet, like two plants learning how to grow in the same sunlight without blocking each other. I stopped asking, "How was your day?" Started asking, "Did anything feel heavy today?" She still shrugged sometimes, but once in a while she'd say, "A little," and I'd nod, not push, just say, "I'm here." And I meant it. That became our scaffolding, small, real words, steady ones, ones that didn't demand a performance. But healing isn't linear. Some days she smiled, others she didn't get out of bed. I learned to stop measuring our progress by volume, by laughter, or productivity, or politeness. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is show up breath by breath, even when they'd rather disappear. And she was showing up every day in her own way. And I was finally learning how to show up too. She turned 17 in spring. I remember because the lilacs bloomed early that year, almost like the earth itself was trying to soften something for us. I asked her what kind of cake she wanted. She shrugged and said, "Doesn't matter." But then, a few minutes later, almost too quietly, she said, "Lemon, like when I was little." I baked it from scratch. The whole house smelled like memory. We didn't have a party, just the two of us at the kitchen table, the candles flickering between us like a fragile truce. She didn't laugh, but she smiled, and I swear I could almost hear it. After we ate, she asked if we could go for a drive. No destination, just drive. I hadn't heard her ask for anything in so long that I grabbed the keys before she could change her mind. We drove along the coast, windows cracked, the radio playing soft. She didn't talk much, but her shoulders looked lighter. Her hands rested in her lap instead of balled in fists. Eventually she said, "Sometimes I still think about disappearing." My hands clenched the steering wheel a little tighter, but I didn't flinch. I didn't say, "Don't say that." I didn't rush to fix it. I just nodded. "Yeah," I said, "I think a lot of people do." She looked out the window. "But it's different now. I don't want to disappear. I just want the pain to." I said, "That makes sense." And it did. It made more sense than anything I'd ever heard. We parked by the overlook, watched the sun start to sink behind the water, soft and slow, like it was giving us time. Then she asked, "Do you ever feel guilty about before?" I turned to her, my girl with her knotted hair and tired eyes and heart still learning how to beat without apology. "All the time," I said. She didn't look surprised, just nodded. "Me too." I took a breath, then told her the truth. That guilt, it still wakes me up some nights, makes me want to go back and change everything. But I know I can't. So instead, I try to change what I do next. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "I'm not ready to forgive everything. Not yet." I reached over, touched her hand. "You don't have to. I just want to be someone worth forgiving." That was the moment something shifted between us. Not a fix, not a finish line, just the start of a new sentence. She didn't say she loved me. She didn't cry. But when we drove home, she sang quietly along with the radio. Not loudly, not like she used to, but enough to remind me that joy like grief, never really disappears. It just waits for room. Samantha graduated in June. She didn't walk at the ceremony, didn't want the cap or the gown or the attention. At first I felt a sting. I wanted the photos, the moment, proof that we'd made it through. But then she said, "I just want to wake up that morning and feel okay. That's enough of a milestone." And I realized she wasn't healing for show. She was healing for herself. So I made pancakes, her favorite chocolate chip with peanut butter drizzled on top. I put a candle in the middle and sang "Happy Graduation" like a fool in my fraying bathrobe. She laughed, a real one, and I didn't cry, not in front of her. But later I stood in the laundry room and let the tears come, because it had been 5 years since I'd heard that sound without it feeling like a memory. She took a gap year, said she wasn't ready for college, wasn't sure if she ever would be. I told her she didn't need to be anything on a schedule. I meant it. She got a part-time job at a plant nursery on the edge of town. Started taking care of succulents and lavender starts and basil that never quite rooted right. I'd pick her up some evenings. She'd smell like soil and sunlight, and her fingernails were always dirt-stained. She seemed steadier, still quiet, still guarded, but not like before, not like someone trying to vanish. One afternoon, I asked if she wanted to repaint her bedroom. She raised an eyebrow, said, "You mean finally cover up the peeling pink butterflies?" I laughed. "Yeah, I think it's time." We spent the whole weekend doing it. She picked a shade called Still Water, somewhere between gray and blue, calm, grown. We didn't talk much during the painting, but at one point she looked at me and said, "It feels like I can breathe in here now." I nodded. "That's what rooms should feel like," she smiled, then said, "That's what mothers should feel like too." And in that moment, I didn't feel forgiven. I felt understood, and that was enough, more than enough. Because I wasn't looking for a ribbon or a reunion speech. I just wanted to know that when she walked into a room with me in it, she didn't have to brace herself anymore. And now, for the first time, she didn't. She moved out last fall. Not in anger, not in silence, just naturally. She found a tiny apartment above a used bookstore with crooked floorboards and a window that looks out onto a crooked tree. She painted the kitchen yellow, said it made the mornings feel less lonely. The first night in her new place, she texted me a photo of her dinner, boxed mac and cheese with a single basil leaf on top. "Fancy," she wrote. I laughed so hard, I startled the cat. I didn't visit right away. I wanted her to have space, real space, not the kind I used to give when I was afraid to get too close. But after a few weeks, she invited me. I brought her a housewarming gift, a tiny jade plant in a cracked ceramic pot I'd made in my own class. She smiled and said, "It's beautiful," and for the first time, I believed she meant it. We sat on the floor that afternoon, no couch yet, and drank tea from mismatched mugs. She told me about a girl she'd met at the nursery. Soft smile, kind eyes. Her name was Elise. There was a flicker of nervousness in her voice when she said it, a test, and I passed. Because I smiled, genuinely, and said, "Tell me everything." She did, not all at once, not every detail, but enough. Enough to know she wasn't hiding anymore, and enough to know I wasn't either. Before I left, she walked me to the door, hugged me longer than she had in years. Then she said, "I'm not who I used to be." And I said, "I know, and I'm not either." She nodded. "I like us better now, so do I. Now my house is quiet again, but not in the same way. It's a good quiet, a peace-earned kind of quiet. Sometimes I still set two places at the table, not because I expect her, but because I like remembering what it feels like when she's here. Sometimes I talk to her out loud, just to hear her name in my mouth. Samantha. I say it like a promise now, not a prayer. And sometimes, when I least expect it, I'll get a message, a voice memo of her laughing, a photo of a new plant she rescued from the discount rack, a playlist she made for mornings with too much rain. And when I hear that laugh, clear, soft, entirely hers, I close my eyes and whisper, "There you are," because I used to think my daughter was fading. But the truth is, she was becoming, and now, so am I, in my own time, in my own way. We're still learning each other, still making space, but it's space filled with light now, not silence. And if that's not love, I don't know what is.